Okay, this is the first day of our new foldable that's up here. It's on solving quadratics and it's unit 11. So if you want to go and write down the tabs if you haven't yet, the first one is graphing, the second one factoring, the third one square rooting, the fourth one completing the square, and the fifth one the quadratic formula. And this foldable will kind of be a repeat of what we've done the last two foldables, or at least part of it will. So go ahead and turn in the first tab to graphing, and we're going to go ahead and begin with that. We're just going to have two examples in our foldable with graphing, and we're solving by graphing, and I'm going to show you how to do it on your graphing calculator from some stuff we've learned before. So go ahead and write this example down, leave room, we'll do two of these, and that should give you a good idea of what we're doing. So if you remember, what we end up doing is we want to find the vertex first, and our vertex is going to go right in the middle for the table. So what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to switch to my graphing calculator, and I'm going to go ahead and type in this equation in my graphing calculator and graph it. Okay, so my equation is, let's see, x squared plus 6x plus 8. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in. I'm going to go ahead and hit graph. Okay, if you notice your vertex, okay, which is right here, ends up being a minimum like we talked about a couple weeks ago. So what you're going to do is you're going to hit second, trace, and I'm going to choose the minimum feature to find my vertex, which is number 3. And then it's going to ask me to choose a number on the left, an x value on the left of my vertex, an x value to the right, and then it's going to find it for me when I hit enter for a third time. Easiest thing to do, a number, an x value way to the left is negative 10, so I hit enter. One to the right is positive 10, hit enter. And then hit enter one more time. You can use negative 10 to 10 in about every problem, because that's what the window is settings are. It goes all the way over to negative 10 on the left and all the way to the right to positive 10. So we're going to round. If you notice, our minimum has a vertex of, our parabola has a vertex of negative 3, negative 1. So I'm going to go ahead and go back and fill that in on my table. Okay, so our vertex is negative 3, negative 1. And then if you remember, I know I'm going to use smaller x values above, counting in order. So negative 4, negative 5. And if I get bigger on the bottom, negative 2, negative 1, those are the values that are going to go there. The cool thing that we're learning today is we can actually use the table feature on our graphing calculator, okay, to find the y values that go with them without having to fill in x. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to go back to my graphing calculator. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into table settings. Okay, I want to set my table. So if you go into table setting, there should only be one thing you have to enter. So I'm going to hit second and window because table set, okay, is above the window in blue, the window button in blue. So what it basically is asking me to do is it wants to know what x value I want to start my table at. So if you looked at the top of your table, the x value that was on the top left was negative 5. So I want my table to start with an x value of negative 5. That's really the only thing I need to fill in right now, okay, because I'm counting by ones. Okay, this wants to know what you're counting by, and I want to count by ones, which I did. So that should be all that I fill in. The next thing I'm going to do is actually go to my table. So I'm going to hit second and graph, because above graph you can see it has table written in blue. And that fills in my table for me. So it gives me the y values that go in for my table when I have those x values. Notice how they repeat, okay, the quadratic pattern, how they repeat 3, 0, negative 1, 0, 3. You should kind of remember that from the last time we talked about it. So let me go back and fill those in my table on the other page. Okay, so 3, 0, negative 1, 0, 3. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and graph it. If you remember on Math Excel, what it has you do first, it has you plot the vertex. So negative 3, negative 1, it's going to have you put that on there first. And then you just choose another point from your table, and that will make the parabola open up. So negative 2 zeros on the table. So I'll go ahead and do negative 2, 0. On Math Excel, again, it will open up the parabola to where it should open up. The other question that we're doing is we are finding the zeros again. You remember finding the zeros. Okay, if you remember, that's where the graph crosses the x-axis, so right here and here. The nice thing is, in our table, we actually have our answers. So again, if you're finding the zeros, you really know you want to know when your y value equals 0. So if you notice here and here, that's where my y value is 0 on the graph. Okay? And it wants to know the x coordinates that create those answers. So the x coordinates of -4 and -2 give me zeros. Okay? Give me the zeros in the graph. So on Math Excel, it has you just separate them with a comma. So -4 and -2 are my zeros for this graph. Okay, here's my next example that we're going to graph. So again, I'm going to go ahead and get my graphing calculator out. I'm going to go ahead and type in just the equation. Okay, just the equation. So let's go ahead and do that first. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go into y equals. I'm going to clear that out, what I had in before. And I have x squared minus 4x plus 4. And I'm going to go ahead and hit graph. Okay, you're going to notice that your vertex is right here. Okay, somewhere in that area. It ends up being a minimum again. So I'm going to hit second trace. I'm going to go to minimum, which is number 3. And I'm going to choose an x value on the left. So again, I'll use -10. 1 on the right of my minimum, so +10. And then I'll hit enter 1 extra time. And it should light up on it. Okay, now again, there's always a little bit of a rounding error. But this would be 2, 0 is my vertex, so I'll go ahead and fill that in. Okay, so 2, 0. And then 2 numbers smaller than that, 2x values are 1, 0, and then 2 bigger are 3, 4. So again, I'm going to go back to my calculator and go to the table settings, and I want to start with an x value of 0 in my table settings. So I'm going to hit second and window. That takes me to my table settings, and I want to start with an x value of 0. And so now I'll hit second and graph to go to the actual table. So there's my y values that go with the x's I had. Again, notice that quadratic pattern, okay, where the numbers start repeating themselves. So I'm going to go back and go ahead and fill those in. Okay, so 4, 1, 0, 1, 4. We again know this is the vertex. So if I'm graphing it, I'm going to put the vertex at 2, 0 in Math Excel. And then I'll just pick another random point, so maybe I'll use 0, 4. Okay, and again, Math Excel should graph it for you on there. Now, on this one, again, I need to find my zeros. Okay, that's where it crosses the x-axis. It looks like here it just barely touches, which makes sense because there's only one y value that is 0, and the x that gives me that is 2. Okay, that's the only value I have a y that's 0, and the x answer that gives me that is 2. So my 0, I really only have one of them. My answer is 2. On Math Excel, it says to list 2 of them. If you have the same one, then just write it twice. So I have just 1 0, it's 2, but I'll write it twice because Math Excel tells me to do